My name is Karen Boss, and I am a senior editor at Charlesbridge Publishing. And I have been very lucky to work with three very special creators and editors on a series of books. And we're going to talk about those today. So I want to start off by saying that we all in this room today believe that poetry has this really unique power of using language that can reach into somebody's heart and then like share big ideas from there. And you all really homed in on that and you paired it with voices and actions of young people who have become catalysts for change. And that's really at the center of this series. So today we're going to celebrate that intersection of poetry and youth activism through the collection of your three picture books: No Voice Too Small, No World Too Big, and the newest one, No Brain the Same. So these books honor young people who noticed injustice, who really cared really deeply, and then they chose to act. And the three of you, Lindsay Metcalf, Keela Dawson, and Jeanette Bradley, are all the three that came together and said to each other, you know what, we should make this work. And then they did, which is really impressive. So I'm going to have you each introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll get into some questions.
Sure. Hi, I'm Lindsay Metcalf. I am a children's author of nonfiction and poetry. I live in Kansas, and I used to be a journalist.
Hi, I'm Jeanette Bradley. I live in Rhode Island, and I am an author and an illustrator. And I have really loved working on this series of books with all of you.
I'm Keela Dawson, and I currently live in Cincinnati, Ohio. And before becoming a children's author, I worked as a community organizer, educator, and advocate for children with disabilities and learning differences.
Excellent. So it's even right there in those tiny little introductions, you can see the different things that you all bring to the table that really make this series so rich. So I want to start off by just saying that activism doesn't always start with power, right? It starts with noticing something and caring and speaking up. And so you really looked across these three books to find subjects, young people who refused to stay silent. And then you brought in poets who honored those young people's stories with real intention and real care. So let's start off with a question. So when you began the first collection, No Voice Too Small, what really guided you when you were trying to shape how you were going to approach these young activists and honor them through poetry? Like, what was the guiding principle that you used? So, Lindsay, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I think the guiding principle and how we chose the subjects was, and Jeanette may be able to speak to this more personally, but I think we wanted readers to see themselves in the book, to see that they have access to their own voices and they have access to this power that's given to us through our voices. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't spotlighting people who already had a platform, because we wanted young readers to pick this up and say, okay, that person is just a sixth grader at some random middle school, and they're doing this huge thing. So maybe I can do this other huge thing that I'm interested in.
Fantastic. And Jeanette, Lindsay mentioned you, so do you want to say anything else about that?
I think what Lindsay's referring to is that part of the inspiration for this series was my daughter, who at the time was only 6, who's now in middle school, was really into nonfiction biographies. And one day she said, I wish that I was a famous dead person so that I could change the world. And I said, you don't have to be famous or dead in order to be able to make change. And she didn't believe me. And so that was part of the motivation for writing this, was showing that it's really ordinary people who see a problem and decide to do something about it, who make change.
That's fantastic. So it's so funny, things that little kids say, and that oftentimes we just sort of brush those off. But when you sit down with those things and really think about how deep they are, they're really deep sometimes. Keela, can you talk a little bit about when you were putting together No Voice Too Small, what felt like it was the most important things to get right to the three of you? What did you really just want to get exactly in the right way?
I think the big idea was you young people are doing big things, and everyone can be the someone to who does something. The universal truth is that, like Jeanette said, you don't have to be old or famous. You just have to have that passion and stick-to-itiveness to get things done. And also, you don't have to be alone.
Yes, you can work with other people. Yeah.
You can work with other people, right? Because change takes time.
Yeah. Why did you feel like poetry was the right way to go for this? And then when you chose the poets, you were really thoughtful about choosing poets that had something in common with the subjects. How did you get to that decision?
I can speak to that.
Okay.
So when we were developing No Voice Too Small, it was during the era in publishing when the hashtag own voices was huge. And there was a real push for people to tell their own stories in books. And so we approached this as wanting to provide a real diversity, not just racial, but geographically and economic diversity and all different sorts of diversity. And we wanted to make sure that we were telling each of these stories authentically. So we thought one way to do that would be to bring in other writers to tell these stories. And because we wanted to do a picture book, we knew that each person would get one spread. And then poems just seemed like a natural fit from there. You know, they're a really condensed version of a story, but also they tell emotion and they bring in metaphor and make it feel really big, fill up the space in a way that's meaningful as to a reader. So I think that's where we landed. And the funny thing about that is none of us was a published poet when we made that choice. It was a real leap of faith. And I guess the idea for the book was strong enough that when we started approaching well-established published poets, they saw the potential in it too, and they said yes, thankfully.
That's awesome. And I really have always appreciated the diversity of voices that you have pulled into these collections and the hard work it can take to really get in touch with folks and convince them to participate. And it's so nice when you contact those folks and they connect with your project right off the bat, right? And you had that experience, I think, with quite a few people, which is excellent. So then you went from, let's just look at general activism. And then the second book became about climate justice. So No World Too Big was really an expansion upon the first book, but with a focus around young people who had really had activism around climate justice and climate change. So Jeanette, do you want to talk at all about how that informed sort of these now two books becoming kind of a conversation with young readers about their place in the world and sort of what they can do in the world that they live in as it changes?
Yeah, well, part of the motivation with the second book was that with No Voice Too Small, we had limited ourselves to only doing US-based activists. And Keela has lived all over the world and really wished that we could feature some of the amazing kids around the world doing these things, kids and young people. And we felt like the unifying issue that all young people face around the globe is climate change. It affects all of us. We all live on this planet. And so we felt like that was that was a story that needed to be told from a global perspective. And a really important one, probably the biggest issue facing young people at this moment.
So, Keela, I hear that from Jeanette that came from you a little bit. So can you talk about why you think an international perspective is so important?
Having lived abroad in places where climate change has affected those communities, it was important, I think, to share those personal stories. Like Marinelle Ubaldo, I mean, her entire village was destroyed, and I personally have personal experience with that, being from New Orleans. I mean, you know, so it's showing kids how this is a global issue. It needs a global solution. And the same things can happen in different parts of the world. So we need to have a global solution to the problem.
Excellent.
And if I might add, not only a global solution, but it shows the different ways that climate change affects different regions. And it also shows that we can chunk it into different ways of approaching the huge problem, that we can all approach it differently and work toward one solution, which is to improve carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So then after No World Too Big, I don't remember if it was published yet, if it was close to being published, and the three of you got in touch with me and said, hey, can we get in a room and kind of talk to you? Because we have this other idea. And so why did No Brain the Same feel like a necessary next step? And what do you think it allows the whole group of books to say that it couldn't say before?
This. When we did No Voice Too Small, it was a wide angle lens. Okay. And we looked at the questions that youth were asking, and they wanted to know what needs changing. No World Too Big, we zoomed in to one issue, right? Climate change. And the question there was, what does the world need now? No Brain the Same is a selfie. These kids were asking themselves, what do I need? And how does that help others?
Ah, excellent. Jeanette or Lindsay, do you want to say anything either?
I think when we were coming, we knew we wanted to work together again. That was the basic question that we were asking. And we thought, well, what topic makes sense that we can bring that someone else hasn't already covered? And two of us come from neurodivergent families, Jeanette and I, and Keela has worked with special needs students around the world. And so we realized very quickly that while there are a growing number of books that feature neurodivergent characters, there are very, very few that tell true stories about real people. And we wanted to bring that representation and show that no matter what challenges you face, you have a voice, or if not a literal voice, there is a way for you to communicate your goals with the world. And everyone has that ability to bring that to the table.
That's great. Excellent. So with all three of these books, what kind of responses have you gotten from young readers or educators that have surprised you the most? And or what do you wish for them to take away from these books?
I think one of the things that's been surprising for me, and also for the young readers, is that I have done some school and other organization presentations with these books and then had kids actually write mail to their elected officials. And that really blew their minds that they had the power to do that. They just kept saying, like, what? Like, I can do that? Like, over and over again, they just kept asking that question. And I also think it was a surprise to some of the adults in the room who had never done that before. I didn't tell them what to write. I said, what do you care about? I helped them think about what they cared about, why they cared about the issue, what they think needed to happen. Then I helped them find their legislator's address and write an actual letter, put a stamp on it, all of that, and mail it. And that whole process was completely surprising to 100% of the kids that I talked to. And which tells me that there's a lot of education that needs to happen around how easy it is to use your voice and that you don't have to be an adult.
Yeah, that's excellent.
That was an excellent exercise. I was actually at the Ohio Museum once, and I always ask kids to do a craft after. And I asked them to think about one thing they could do to make a difference. And I saw this kid, about 7 or 8, she picked up a marker and she wanted to do something, but you could see she was struggling with an idea. And so I asked her about her interests, and she said she liked fashion. And her mom reminded her like she likes to draw. So that sparked an idea, and she immediately started drawing. And I said, what are you doing? What are you making? And she said that she was designing a shirt that someone who had trouble dressing could put on and take off easily. I mean, the
Yeah.
news
And
station
that-
was there and they filmed her, you know?
That idea came from Marley Dias, who was featured in No Voice Too Small. That's the one I was going to say that stuck with me the longest. She distilled it like this. She said that if you take your talent and you combine it with your passion, that's when you can make the most difference. And so we've tried to communicate that with readers all over to help them make that connection. And another story that really stuck with me was Zach Walls, only because these people, including Zach, are continuing their activism and really just exponentially growing their influence. He is one who is now running for the US Senate in Iowa. And maybe he'll win. I think he will, but he may be president someday. Any of these kids, I think, could be president someday.
I think it goes back to what Jeanette said earlier about your own daughter at 6 years old feeling a pull toward activism and then not knowing how to do it, right? And then because she doesn't, she just thinks she has to opt out. And what this collection does, I hope, is really points out to kid readers all over that that isn't a thing that they have to do. That if they have a thought or a worry or a concern or a passion, that they don't have to just say, well, I'm nobody, so I opt out. They can instead opt in lots and lots of different ways, right? And I think that's one of the most powerful things about the collection overall. And we've just talked about sort of what do you tell a kid who comes up to you and says, I want to do something, but I don't know what. And is there some easy answer to that? I mean, we have these examples you've all just given, but is there an easy answer or something that you say when when a kid asks you that?
I think in order for anyone to sustain activism and to really feel the passion behind it, they have to care about it in a very personal way. So I think the thing that I would ask them is, what do you care about the most?
Yeah.
It's essential that you connect with other people. This is a cross-country road race. It's not a sprint. It's also not a marathon. And you have to have other people along the way because it's impossible to sustain the level of energy that activism takes over the long term alone. So I would also talk to them about, what kind of organizations they have access to, like what exists near them, how they can hook in with other people who care about the same thing that they care about.
That's great.
And it may be that you encourage them to start a club at their own school. Like, what teacher can you talk to that you think might help you do this? Because often it is just an idea that you start with and you don't know how to go about it. So that's when hooking in with other people comes in.
Yeah, and I think a lot of kids, a lot of schools have mechanisms for clubs too, that then that's how you find the other people. You might not know them initially, but you say, hey, we're going to have a club meeting that's focused on this thing. And suddenly there's 6 other kids that really care about that thing enough to show up at the meeting, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Encouraging kids to share their personal stories. We all have them. And to be okay with that and look at the way we structured the book is, we gave the tips. And it was because we were very cognizant of what motivated these young people to want to share their stories and do something. So I think that's really important too, is to be able to be comfortable sharing your stories.
The 3 of you really made certain that you were not going to feature anybody in these books unless you had their personal permission to do so. And that was very important for the folks who are not household names. But there's sort of this understanding in the world that if you're a household name, then you're fair for anybody to write about or talk about without your permission, but you all decided you weren't doing that. So can you talk a little bit about why you thought it was so important to make certain that every one of your subjects agreed to be in these books?
I think the first idea behind that was that we were featuring minors and we didn't want to exploit anyone, number one. So we wanted to make sure that we had their permission and their parents' permission or some proxy. If they were a little bit of a name, they may have a manager or something like that. We wanted to make sure we got with them. But then in No Brain the Same, we approached it a little bit differently because we wanted to show that there are famous people who do struggle with challenges and have ways of overcoming them. So we actually featured Billie Eilish in No Brain the Same, and we wanted to make sure that we got her permission as well, just because it didn't seem fair to seek that for everyone else and then zoom in on this one part of her life that she doesn't necessarily talk about that much, but it is a big part of her life. So we didn't speak with her directly, but we spoke with her team, and it was passed along to her, and we do have her blessing on the project.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic, and I think the reason I brought it up is because I think it's good for anyone watching this to know that you all did that legwork and how time consuming that was in many cases to get in touch with everybody that you wanted to feature to make sure. So I have been so impressed through all three of the books with all of the poetry written by the poets who you invited to participate in the project, but also from the three of you as well. And I did a little weird thing, and I wrote a haiku about each of you, and I'm going to share that right now real quick. So here we go. Lindsay, editor of Research and Digging In, a gem to work with. So that's Lindsay's. And then we have Keela, editor of Broad Views and Culture 2, a treat to work with. And then we have Jeanette, Artwork 2 of Careful Sketching and Art, a gift to work with. So I just thought that in the background as the editor, I'm editing poetry that is so weird for me to do, right? And oftentimes someone will say to me, well, okay, I can change that word, but then this won't be that kind of poem anymore. And I'm like, holy cow, I didn't even know it was that kind of poem to begin with. And you have to be really like sort of vulnerable and not too picky when you're working with all these different kinds of poems too, right? And so I find haikus are, of course, pretty simple to write. And I think one of the cool things about these collections is because you chose poetry, there are so many inroads for curriculum with these books to talk about activism, of course, and to talk about the subject matters, but to also prompt kids to write their own poem that they feel passionate about some subject that they feel passionate about too. And it allows teachers and librarians and parents and other folks, adults, to really find different inroads to use these books with kids and really get them thinking about how these activists made their difference. So are you currently working on anything together, the three of you? Or are you sort of thinking about that?
We are working on something together.
Excellent. Yes, so it's a secret project that the three of you are working on.
You could say it's different, yet it's similar.
Okay.
It involves poetry, but it's very much a history text. So, and it's geared toward a middle grade audience.
Ooh, yeah, lots of words.
All right. Well, that sounds very intriguing. And I think that one of the things that we have found, obviously the four of us, that this team is a really good team. And you three in particular are a fantastic team. So wherever you end up doing more projects together or separately, I feel like the world is going to be a better place because of it. I really feel like this conversation has been fun for sure, and the books really can remind us as well that it's not about age either. Like your books do feature younger folks, but as Jeanette mentioned earlier, that there are adults in the world too who are still surprised that they can write a letter or call their elected officials and really try to make that difference. And I think one of the most important things about books like these is to keep reminding people that we are citizens, and that as citizens, we have the ability to make change in our very, very local circles and in our much, much broader, bigger circles as well. And so I just want to say thank you to all three of you for not only being part of today's chat, but also for really taking the care that you took and the intention you took in making these 3 books. So thank you, all of you.
Thank you, Karen,
thank
for
you,
being
Karen.
the best editor we could have imagined for
Yes.
these books. You've
Mhm.
really shepherded them into the world in the way that we envisioned, and we appreciate that.
Yeah,
Excellent.
they landed in the right place with Charles Bridge and you.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
I honestly think that they are better than what we envisioned when we started out. I think that they've become something really remarkable.
And I completely agree with that. So I think they're a real treat for kid readers and for adults, like we said. All right. Well, thank you everybody for being with us today. And we really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.